It's my pleasure to introduce Lauren Eggleston, Assistant Director of Save the River. She holds a Master of Science in Structural Geology from the University of Alberta. Soon after graduating, she discovered she enjoyed teaching much more than working in industry, which eventually led her to the environmental nonprofit sector. Her work at Save the River focuses on teaching and collaborative research. Her presentation is titled Polystyrene Pollution. Please welcome Lauren Eggleston.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you need a prop for this talk, you probably picked one up earlier this morning. So we're going to talk today about polystyrene pollution, and I'm just going to say that I'm not telling you to go home and throw everything out. That is not my main goal. It's just to make you more aware of what we use every day. First, I want to talk a bit about Save the River. So we are a grassroots advocacy organization, and we track river health and work to ensure that river policies protect the watershed. We primarily work on the American side. We cover from about Cape Vincent all the way up to Akwesasne. We are a Waterkeeper Alliance member since 2004, and a lot of what we've been doing recently, a lot of what I've been working on, works with citizen science and engaging the public to learn more about how they can protect the river, to give them tools so that they can go forward and they can really care about this resource that we all share. So this is only half of our map. So this is the stretch from Cape Vincent all the way up to Ogdensburg. We also partner with TIA on this side, particularly with shoal markers and fishing line recycle stations, which you're all familiar with, but Jen is going to cover. Okay, so what is plastic? It's something that we all use every single day. It starts off as a monomer. So up on the top, I don't think I have a pointer. Up on the top there is a monomer of styrene. The particular one that we're going to talk about today is polystyrene. Plastics are made of a long chain of organic polymers. So if you think of it kind of like a train car, you have the engine and then you have all of these cars behind it. They all look the same and they create this long form. Polymers can be very extensive and they're really easy to adapt into different shapes and forms. Polystyrene specifically is one of the most widely used plastics. There are several millions of tons of it produced per year. In the States, it's resin code number 6. The Canadian side generally has a better handle on this, but those arrows don't mean that it's recyclable. That just indicates that it's a resin code and that it is a plastic and which plastic it is. So polystyrene specifically, there are 2 forms of it. There's one form that is used to make things like CD cases, solo cups, bottles, water bottles, trays, tumblers, and then there's also the extruded form, and that's what's used to make things like this, or floating docks, buoys, trying to think of other things, coolers, and those sorts of materials. A thing about polystyrene is when it's exposed to water, at first it floats, but eventually it photodegrades, and as it photodegrades, it absorbs water, and once it has absorbed the water, it can sink. So it doesn't always float. Polystyrene is also not biodegradable. It is somewhat reusable, and in most facilities, it is not accepted for recycling. And another thing, not the sort that we usually drink from, but if you're looking at a dock or something like that, or building materials to make a home, they often have flame retardants in them, and if there are flame retardants in it, as that degrades, those flame retardants are also released into the environment. So the life cycle of plastic as a whole, we usually only see 2 steps of it. We usually see the use and reuse, and then we see the disposal. And that's really where we interact with it. But it has a much longer process than that. So it starts off with it has to be extracted. It's a petroleum byproduct. Somehow you have to get it out of the ground. Once you've gotten it out of the ground, it goes into production. Sometimes it's made into little nurdles. But it has some sort of raw form where it's a little bead of some variety. Those little beads are then shipped off to different industries where they are fabricated into different products. So this is where they might make a water bottle or a cooler or whatever it's going to be. Then it hits the consumer market. So we go into a store, we say, oh, I'm very thirsty, pick up a bottle of water, chug it down, and then usually you just recycle it. So then it's disposed. Sometimes you might be very conscientious about it and say, okay, well, I'm going to use this thing multiple times. And you can use it, reuse it, but eventually it breaks down to the point where it cracks and you don't want to use it anymore and you recycle it. Then it goes through breakdown. So if it does get recycled, it gets melted down and recreated into something else. Sometimes it just ends in a landfill, or it ends up in the waterways and then eventually makes its way to the lake, the river, or the ocean. Once it's out there, it's going to be exposed to weathering. It's going to photodegrade or photooxidize, depending on the type of plastic that it is. And then occasionally, it can be broken down by microorganisms. So polystyrene specifically, there is research that shows that there is a bacterium that resides in the mealworm gut that can break down parts of polystyrene, but it doesn't break it down fully or completely. So there's still some plastic residue. So this is just to show you that there are many, many steps outside of the bit where we use these plastics. Plastics can be found everywhere. You can find them in oceans, you can find them in sediments, you can find them in freshwater, soils, you can find them in the air. They are ubiquitous across the system. They often end up in our waterways through urban runoff from storms, storm events, and just sometimes if it's things like, if you're wearing a fleece and you wash your fleece, there's some material, some little components that are going to break off of that. They're going to go into your waterway system, and those actually can't be caught by your wastewater treatment plant. So those are going to make it all the way out into the larger body of water. So it's found all over. Particle-wise, Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence are the most polluted part of the Great Lakes system. So just sort of going through this image from the American Scientist, in Lake Superior, you have about 30,000 particles per square kilometer. You move into Lake Michigan, about 17,000 particles per square kilometer. Lake Huron is a bit of an oddity here. There's 3,000. It's also the least researched and least well-known. Move into Lake Erie, where you hit serious industrialization, 46,000 particles per square kilometer. And then you get to Lake Ontario, where it takes a huge jump at 230 particles per square kilometer. We can assume that the St. Lawrence River also picks up more particles from Lake Ontario, and so our number is probably even higher. So the plastic problem, it really is a problem. It's 6% of the global oil consumption. There are 380 million tons produced annually. This one always gets me. 2/3 of plastics that are used once and then disposed of. And they pose great health hazards to humans and wildlife. This is a picture from the beach near my house after a storm. So this is something that we can all see just by walking down to the river. Okay, so this is very doom and gloom. What are we doing about it? There are lots of different things that we are doing about it. So the first bit comes in 1988. There was a NOAA research crew out in the Pacific, and they discovered what we now know as the plastic patch in the North Pacific. So plastic pollution in general, when scientific research is done on it, we usually view it through the lens of plastics in the water. But you have to remember that this is also plastics in the soil and plastics in the air. So first described then, and then we found the 5 gyres. We found that there was a plastic patch in each of those 5 gyres. And the new research that's coming out now points out a couple different things. One is the new research is really focusing on plastic's impact on human health and what it's doing to us. The research looks to quantify thresholds to say how much in the system is safe. And then we get into where we're finding plastics. Okay, so we've got it in the air, we've got it in the soil, we've got it in the water. It has been found in human poop. It has also been found on both sides of the placental boundary. So children born now are exposed to plastic before they are born. Recently, these studies came out earlier this year. It's been found both in human blood and in deep lung tissue. So plastics absorb toxins, adsorb toxins, and pseudoestrogens. These things all have impacts on our health. So it's something that we really need to pay attention to. And from that chart, or the picture with all of the numbers on it, Pollution in freshwater might be worse than it is in the oceans. So when you hear about the oceans, it's possible that it's worse where we are. So studies on the Great Lakes have found largely polyethylene, polypropylene, and polystyrene in a growing number of consumables. Things like beer have it in it. Research has also shown increases in airborne plastic. This is a photo taken, I think, by Anna.
Yeah, what is that,
Georgina Island. Yeah, so this is polystyrene that has broken apart from a floating dock and has washed ashore. So what are we doing about it? Trash in the St. Lawrence River, well documented. You can observe it if you go down to the shoreline. Removing this litter from the water is a pressing concern. And we're doing shoreline cleanups about it. So this is one of the things that we've partnered with TIA on. So getting out there, seeing the plastic, picking it up, this is great. But what about the plastic that you can't see? What about those microplastics? What about those little fibers? What are we doing about those? So the cleanup actually acts as this really powerful tool where you say, okay, you can go out, we can collect this plastic trash, and we can put it into a recycling system, and that's very good. But it also starts the conversation of saying, okay, how can you act past this? What can you do to make a larger impact and get plastics out of the system? So these cleanups, they really build community knowledge and they empower people to take action in their own lives. I have a slide in between that I thought I had, but I don't have. I'm just gonna go back one just to say that when we start to look at it, you can start thinking about if you have, let's say that you have a fleece and you've had that fleece for maybe 2 weeks. And you say, you come away from this program and you say, oh, I need to get rid of that. I don't want plastics in my life. That's not what I'm telling you to do. Because what you want to do is you want to use it up. Use it up, make it do, make it last as long as you can, and then get rid of it. Because part of the problem that we're dealing with is that we use something quickly and then we dispose of it. So let that garment live out its full life. Or if you have an Nalgene water bottle, use it until it is completely done and the handle's broken and you can't even think about drinking out of it anymore. Just use things up. Okay, so one of the current issues that we're working on are docks. So there's the difference between encapsulated docks and unencapsulated docks. The top photo shows an unencapsulated dock, and this is what we're trying to move away from. On the Canadian side, you all have been much better about this. On the American side, we're a little bit behind. So the idea is that rather than using unencapsulated polystyrene, you encapsulate that inside something. Whether that's a different plastic, sometimes that happens, sometimes it's a metal drum. So you still get the flotation benefits of this plastic, but you're also not allowing it to be photodegraded. You're not allowing muskrats to go in there and make a nice home and chew it. So there are ways to take action against this. The sale and production of unencapsulated buoys and docks is banned in Canada, so well done. On the American side, Maryland, Maine, and Vermont have all taken steps toward this. New York and New Jersey are working on it. Ooh, the sign. So now I'm going to go into a couple different legislation bits. In New York State, we have the Polystyrene Waste Reduction Act. This took effect this year. The big thing that comes from it is that this is mostly based on food products. So these are things that you might find in the store. This is what we're hoping to attach the docks and buoys to, so that it's just an amendment onto this bill that already exists. We have the Microbead-Free Waters Act. So this one benefited all of the Great Lakes. This actually came out of a study done on the Great Lakes, where there were all of these little plastic microbeads, particularly in face wash and body wash. It is no longer legal to produce those products, so we have successfully gotten microbeads out of the water, produced from the face and body washes. There's no more going into the system, which is really the way to address this. And then we have the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2021. This is the first bill on our side that really addresses the plastic pollution crisis, acknowledges it, and says, okay, we need to do something about this. On the Canadian side, by 2030, 50% of all plastic packaging needs to be recycled content. There's also a really ambitious recycling target for 90% of plastic beverage containers. And that first thing that I talked about with the arrows circling the number 6, so The Canadian government has enacted legislation that prevents that misleading information. So like, you might see those recycle numbers and say, oh, I can recycle this, but that's pretty misleading. So there have been steps taken to avoid that. So the question is, this is from an earlier talk where I asked everyone to document every item of plastic that they touched for one day. This was my morning, from about 6:15 until about noon. So can we live with plastic? Well, we are living with plastic. Can we live with less of it is really the better question. So we're seeking a balance between the pros and the cons. Plastics are versatile, they're lightweight, they're affordable, they are durable. There are huge medical advances made because of plastics. Things like IV bags, implants, all sorts of things like that. It does have a pretty significant impact on wildlife and human health. There are known carcinogens in plastics. It has impact on ecosystems. Once it's in the system, it's pretty much impossible to remove it. Part of it we can address, because right now we have pretty inadequate systems to dispose and recycle it. That's something that we can do. We are the solution in that part. And on a personal level, you can pick one thing and say you're not going to use that, or that you're going to reuse something. If it's something as simple as, everybody talks about straws, if it's something as simple as saying, I'm not going to use plastic straws, or I'm not going to buy plastic water bottles, I'm going to reuse a glass bottle or reuse the bottle that I already have. You can take that one step and that makes a big difference. So these are just references. The top thing on the sort of coral balls up there, those you can use in your laundry. They remove some of the lint from your laundry when it's wet. And then the one on the bottom is kind of like just a filtration system, and it actually, you connect it into your laundry system. These are produced in Nova Scotia. And as your wash is done, it pulls fibers out, and that actually takes out about 90% of any particles. Thank you for your attention. And don't throw everything out, just use it up.
Thank you, Lauren, for that wake-up call. We need it. And I think the generation that's following mine have got the message. And let's keep moving the ball down the field.